Hello everyone, welcome to Longarming by Jaclyn. We are here today with
Tabitha.
We'll do it again.
Tabitha.
From Fiddlesticks Quilting, and it is back, the moment you've all been waiting for. We're going to go ahead and do the next step of joy sewing. So it's not over. We have been eking our way through the project. So if you are interested, you can join. It's a free Wonky Improv sampler SewAlong, and there's a playlist. I'll put a link in the description. You go to the playlist, you can watch all the blocks and techniques, and for each of those you do as much as you want. So if you enjoy the technique, make a bunch of them. If you didn't enjoy the technique, maybe experiment around, play with it a little bit, and whatever you produce, plus your orphan blocks, plus everything else, will end up in your Wonky Improv sampler. And we're up to putting together and assembling our items. So the first method was just regular. So let me grab a block. Pretend that you have two blocks that are the same size. Oh yeah, we do.
Okay, so in previous episodes, we have talked about if you have two blocks that are the same size, then you would join them like you normally do. You put them right sides together. There should be a straight side. So along the straight side, open it up exactly like you do every other quilt block in the universe. And then because this is improv, you can also do this with blocks that are similar size and then just trim it down after the fact. So this one is a little bit bigger than this Wonky star. And so if I wanted to join these, I could just join them and then cut them up. Yeah, anywhere I want. And then we talked about free piecing, which is kind of, it's not really a hard line in between these. These techniques sort of blur into one another. So free piecing is, I might take a much smaller block. What do we have here? We got a lot of blocks. So if I have a much smaller block, and free piecing is kind of exactly the same technique as crumb piecing. If you want a little more detail on that, look at our crumb piecing video. But I might sew this on not very similar sizes. And I can add on and then cut away. And that's kind of how free piecing works. So this piece has like a non-square corner. I might take a smaller block and sew it here and then trim that into a square, which is easier to sew to. Or trim it into a weird angle. You're not stuck with squares. But eventually, if you want your quilt to be rectangular, the outer edges, somewhere along the line, you're going to be building out to probably a square or a rectangle. So that's the free piecing. And then we're going to take it a step further today. And this is going to remind you of like a stack and whack technique or the way we did curved piecing. And we're going to join along a curved or wonky line. So first things first, find two pieces that you want to join together. And in this method, you will be losing some. So your focal point that you want to keep should be kind of toward the middle. There's going to be, with all of these add and take away methods, there's some sacrificial fabric that gets cut away to make the shape. So if your favorite thing is in that or on the edge of that, you'll be slicing it. So you want your favorite thing not to be where you're about to cut. Okay, so let's find two blocks.
Okay.
So what is this? Oh. That's from the last t-shirt quilt I did. So here we are. We dug through a huge amount, like just stacks and stacks of Wonky Improv blocks. So find two that you want to join, and we're going to do the wonky line first. And actually I'm going to take this cutting board away, pressing board away. Alright, so find two that you want to join, and let's say there's not a straight line where you want to join them. So I've got this curved piece, and this is also a curved 4-patch. And this is from the curved piecing as well. And let's say I want these together, but instead of joining them like this, I want to join them at a fun angle. So one thing that you have to think about is if I go straight across, that's this long. If I go at an angle, that's a much longer distance. So I need to make sure that my new unit is long enough to cover. And let's say this is how I want them to join. You're going to lose 1/4 of an inch in your seam on both sides. So I am going to uncover an extra quarter, half inch. Put your blocks that you want to join. Decide how you want it to go together. And then where it overlaps, you want to, they're overlapping, you need to make 1/4 of an inch for one side of the seam allowance and 1/4 of an inch for the other. So open the seam up.
I was trying to figure out a way to make it kind of burst.
Yeah.
I want it to go out. That's good.
Okay. So then you will take your ruler, and we have not measured, this is not at any particular angle. I want it to cover the whole side. And just cut. So I happen to be following the edge of this for this example. I thought this was a new blade. Let me get the other blade. So I have my 2 blocks, lay one over the other, scooch them apart from where you had them situated about 1/2 inch, and then you cut a common line. And this common line becomes my seam line where I can line up edges and sew. So you don't have to, I used the already cut edge of this as a guide, but I could have done it this way, and I could have sliced fabric off both pieces to join them together. So let's try that. And then you'll just put those right sides together and sew your 1/4 of an inch like you normally would. Okay. So you just slice a common line. Remember, you're going to lose 1/2 inch for seam allowance. So if you have it exactly where you want it, you got to scoot it open about 1/2 inch. So if you want your stitch line to be here, you need to go 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch. Give yourself
okay.
about 1/2 inch open.
Gotcha. Okay.
If you're not that particular, then slice where it is, and it'll just tighten up.
Yeah, okay.
Like
So
any
just
other
slice
2
like that.
things you sew together, you're going to lose 1/2 inch to the seam allowances. There you go. And then you'll just fold those, flip it over right sides together. And now you have a nice clean sewing edge to join. At any angle you want, you just make the block fit the angle you want. So let's go ahead and sew those. Okay, so we went to the machine and did a seam and pressed, and then you're left with this. So the next thing we might want to do is incorporate maybe some low volume to give your eye a resting place. So just because a lot of your quilt is scrappy doesn't mean you cannot add some low volume in there and fit that in. So what I'm going to do is make a block from this. Make sure nothing's under it, so you'll cut that too. And I'm just going to cut a strip of this off to have. It seems like no matter how big your table is, you need more room.
Yeah.
There's always room for more. And where that seam is, it won't cut. Where the table seam,
Yeah.
I gotta. Okay, so here's my background. And here is my block. And I've got these pieces sticking off, but let's say I want my background to go maybe across this way. I'm going to line this up where I think I want it, remembering that it's going to scooch in 1/2 inch right where your seam is. So if you lay that exactly where you want it to be, it's going to end up a little in from that. So wherever you want it, open it up about 1/2 inch, scoot your 2 layers apart. And I'm going to use the edge of this fabric again. I already have a straight edge here. And I'm just going to take my rotary cutter and cut along there. So find where you want it to be joined. Cut yourself an edge. So do you want a hunk of this grunge?
Sure.
Let's see. How big is your block? Where do you think you're going to go?
I think we'll go this way.
Like across here?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll cut you, let's say about yay much. It's a good use of like scraps where you've done maybe applique or fussy cutting and you've got weird angles. Use that and you're gonna chop all that kind of messy bit off.
Okay.
So it's a good use of your weird little bits of fabric you have left. All right, so proceed. So for this method, to make all of your angles line up the way you want, both pieces are face up. I know a lot of things is right sides together when you're sewing, but when you're cutting and you want those pieces to match up afterwards at a weird angle or whatever it is, you want to do both face up. And then you just match up your new lines. If you have taken the time to place where you want this left to right along the seam, you want to pay attention to where you put that over, and you can use a erasable marker and draw a line across where you're cutting. That way when you fold it over, you've got matching points to match up to. Because in these improv blocks, you're not going to necessarily have a seam there. This is all, the seam is wherever.
Right.
So if you have like positioned it like, oh, I want this to come out, and there was a whale there, and the whale is like spraying out of his blowhole, whatever. You can cut, do your lines, and then when you fold it over, you can match those two lines to each other and get it to match back up the way you meant. Okay, so then we're going to take this to the machine and sew again. So this way we're starting to go from individual blocks to bigger neighborhoods. We're starting to accumulate larger and larger pieces that are going to start to flush out into your full quilt of crazy awesomeness. Okay, so we came from the machine, and that is not my piece.
Yeah.
So we've introduced some background using that same sort of stack and slash method. So now let's pretend that my white here is gonna end up looking kind of more like a stripe or a sashing in the finished quilt, and I want to put something above it, but I'm kind of over, you make the angle match with stack and slash with a straight line. So if you have two units and you want them to be, the edges go like this, but you want them to be joined, like the motifs you like maybe looks like this. So you use stack and slash to change the angle of the seam to be what you want it to be. So now we're gonna make a curved one. So pretend this white is gonna be like a stripe through the quilt, and I want it to be curved on top. So it's the same thing. And this is very similar to our curved piecing video. So if you want a longer tutorial, you can see that. So now I gotta find something long that's going to be long enough to cover that.
I've got long piece over there. It's
Do
that
you?
long strip. Yeah.
Okay. So we rated the Joy Sewing block box, and we both found this is string piece. It's a stitch and flip method. And we both got some long string pieced units because they're long enough to cover this piece is this long, and that's that one. So again, it's gonna be like a stack and slash style join, except this time we're gonna do a curve. And you're gonna be sewing along it, so you don't want it to be too steep. If the curve is real sharp, it can be a little trickier to sew around. I mean, try one, see what you think. But it's more difficult the tighter your curve is.
Okay.
And you can do like an S, you can do an arc, so you don't have to just go one way, you can snake back and forth all you want. So if your curve, whoop, let's imagine it's a hill, however high your hill is, or if you go up and down, all of that has to be in the part that's overlapped. And then when you seam it, you're gonna squeeze it in another ½ inch. So the amount that you overlap has to be a good healthy chunk, because your curve has got to fit in this overlap. So I know it's kind of hard to see, but the edge of this block is here, and then the edge of the selvage is there. So I have this much room to curve around in here. I'm gonna scoot this over because I want it to match on this side with color. This side is white. It's not gonna show me good contrast anyway, so these blocks aren't the exact same length, but once they're joined, you can just trim them to the same size. Okay, so I have from here to here this rectangular area to create my curve. Both units are face up. I'm gonna lose some of each, that's part of it. So I'm just gonna do like a nice S curve. Be careful, do not slice your hand off. Go slowly, press down, not forward. Okay, now for this one, because my edges don't match, let me make sure it cut. There we go. Because my edges don't match, if I start moving stuff around, I'm gonna lose where I was, left to right. And if you're not matched left to right, if you have a straight line and it shifts, you just trim more off the edges, no big deal. If you have a curved line, I have to match this curve. So I want to take a little ruler and try to go 90 degrees from the curve. So as the curve is going around, you want to be 90 degrees or a right angle right where it crosses and draw a line. And then here, as the curve goes around, I'm in by eyeball, best you can do. And you're gonna go along every couple inches. The more reference points you have, the more matchup points you have, so whatever makes you comfortable.
It's kind of like notches and garments.
It's exactly like notches and garment sewing. For the same reason, because it's a curve, how do you know where along that curve to start and end? It's exactly like that. So I'm just gonna go and create start and stop points where I know the fabric needs to cross at these little spots. I'm not even doing where this fabric starts, very close to the beginning, and I'll do it way close to the end.
So I can start like right here, wherever I want, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
However much is overlap. So here is the bottom edge. I wonder if this is more visible. Here's the bottom edge. I'll just do a dashed line.
Okay.
That underneath block it's 2 layers thick in here. So there's the edge of the bottom block. You can see the edge of the white block there. So this rectangle is your playground, and do whatever curve you want in there. Whoop-de-doo. I'm making a face like I'm the one cutting it. I'm like me making that face
like,
is
which
helping
way I wanna
you. Okay. Yours is darker. I'm gonna give you the white marker. I think it might show up better. Use whatever tool shows up on the fabric you're using. So here's some white chalk. You might have to use actually this on the white and that on the dark.
Okay.
But whatever gives you a mark you can see. Go 90 degrees from the curve. So your curve is going, right here is about 90 degrees. And that's gonna change as you move along the curve. Then that will match up.
So like this way,
And then-
it's still go that way.
Like you gotta mark this one too. Like that mark matches to you.
Oh, okay.
Matches to him.
Gotcha.
So she's got a really dark fabric here and a really light fabric here. So the same tool is not gonna show up on both.
Right.
Well, that's all we're doing is finding a tool that shows up. And it's the right side, so you want something that's going to come out, whether you are
So same in here.
washing it out or heating it out. I would go, see that's more like 90 degrees.
Okay.
See, it looks more like a plus sign. And then that's gonna match to this one here, which is perfect.
And this way,
Right. And you gotta try to visualize right at the point where it crosses. Try to imagine a perfect plus sign. So if it's skinnier or fatter, you know you're not quite there. And you can move that ruler back and forth and try to find like, no. And have it form a perfect plus sign where your ruler crosses your cut.
That's pretty cool. I learned all kinds of tricks.
And like, you could actually do right here at the end, since you have this straight line here, just continue it down, and that's another match point here.
Okay.
You can kind of Because if you start to shift it left to right, all of a sudden your curves aren't going to match up necessarily. So this little part, you can use this again if you wanted to put another stripe somewhere. You could pair this with something like this, which is busy, goes really nice with something like a solid.
Yeah.
So you can see this shape. If you pair this with something really busy, you're not going to have as much contrast to see this. Which is, it's not wrong, it's not bad, but if you want to see this, that's one way to get contrast, is to use a solid color with a little distinction, and you can put this on a strip of, say, white, do it again, and you can use this. Okay. Or if you're over it, you can just throw it in the crumb bin or throw it in the trash. It's whatever, it's your quilt.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you'll go over to the machine and you'll flip this and you'll match your hash points as you go. So you'll make them match and bend it along as you go. Okay. And we did this in curved piecing. This is just the same thing, only longer. It's a little bit bigger, but this is basically exactly the same as our curved piecing. And you'll have your little match points. So let's go to the machine. Okay. So we're back from the machine, and this is what came out from mine. I pressed it and cut it, but this tab sewed that, and there's this tab. So you can create a curved edge or a rounded edge. The point is, if you lay your two fabrics face up and you want them to join, and you cut a common seam between the two of them, you can sew that together any way you want. So if you want to arrange something fussy cut or a little wonky star, somehow you just cut the seam you want to sew. Okay. And as long as they're stacked face up, it'll pretty much work whatever you do. Okay. All right, so I really like this curve, but my piece on the bottom, well, let's do it this way, this piece on the top is way shorter. So what I am going to do is pick in about ½ an inch from each side. I'm going to find more stuff and add to it, making this unit longer. Then I can sew it to this unit, and then I can keep this curve. And let's talk about trimming a little bit. So wonky stuff, there's always going to be some sacrificial stuff. It's add and cut away. You're going to be adding some stuff, you're going to be cutting some stuff away. So one option is to pick about ½ an inch here, extend this unit by sewing on here, and then after I press that, I can extend this seam, and then I have more fabric, and I can trim and keep more of this curve that I like, because I really like how this looks. So that's one option. The other option, if you are, let's say you're coming up to the edge of a quilt, you know, you've been filling in and your design's getting bigger and bigger, and somewhere there's a corner that you're gonna fill out. So you can cut more away. Okay, so option one, I can pick this about ½ an inch back, find more fabric, fill this out. So this seam first, extend this seam, and then I have more fabric and I can cut like that. And actually, if I lay my ruler down, this kind of gives me an idea of what shape and size I gotta go for to fill this out. If I'm coming up to the edge of a quilt, or I'm joining to another block that's already straight and flat, you can go, here's a straight edge, I can go 90 degrees from this, and then come up here to where I have fabric all the way up, and I can cut straight. And then this is a 90-degree corner. That might be the corner of my quilt that might be going up against a block that's already in a 90-degree, like a normal quilt block. Or I can, so this way preserves the most fabric. I gotta add on more, and then I'm only cutting off a sliver. This way loses a lot of fabric. I can come here and kind of do halfway in the middle. I can create a wonky angle here. And then when I eventually do get to the edge of a quilt that's gonna be probably rectangular, I mean, make your quilt an octagon, do what you want, but I'm assuming it's gonna be a square or rectangle at the end. Then I'll have to have some kind of wedge-shaped unit to eventually make this flat. So I could cut this way, I could cut this way, I could fill this in and cut that way. It's your quilt. It's Wonky Improv. So whatever you're vibing with, do that. So I think because this is so short, I'm gonna fill out and keep as much of this curve as I can because I really like this. Look how beautiful that came out.
So pretty.
And it looks like we did all these weird angles, and it's really not that hard. People are gonna look at this afterwards and go, how did you get it to, this is like a curve and a whatever. You just did it one weird thing at a time.
Yeah.
And then let your weird things compound. The compounding interest of weirdness. Okay, so let's look at yours and think about how you might want to cut yours, and maybe we can talk it through. So the one option would be pick this, pick that, about a ½ inch, so that I can extend it out and get, so this is about how long you can get over here. I mean, heck, you could extend this and keep more of this guy too. You could go from a curve into a straight, no problem. Or like you've done here, kind of. And who knows how this is going to go in the quilt. So if you had your design wall, this could go in your quilt this way, and this is a straight line, or this could go in your quilt this way, and this is a straight line. So maybe you're going to fit this to a straight line that already exists in the world, like the edge of your design wall, or you're going to say, I decide this is straight, and then build everything off of that, and just pick who's going to be straight. Who says what's straight? Whatever you say is straight.
Right.
Straight. You're going to tell it where to be.
I love this though. Cut that off.
Okay, so lay your ruler where you might cut it and see what you think.
Oh, yeah.
So you'd be losing a little bit of this string piece block if you did it that way, which is not wrong. It's just, do you want to lose it or not?
Yeah, I don't want to lose that.
You could
Add to it.
pretend that's straight and come along this
let's
way,
do that, yeah.
and then you could keep this.
Yeah. Use it for something.
Use that in another block, or you could, like you said, add.
No, I think I want to do it that way. I like what you were suggesting. Cool.
All right, so that is not on the seam of the table. If you want to cut that, go ahead and cut that up. So it's not right or wrong. It's not that we're looking for a specific thing that is the target that you're going to hit or miss. It's about looking at these design choices and saying, oh, mine doesn't roll. I like this, I don't like that. What are the pros and cons? How much of my fabric am I going to lose? Is that my favorite part? I don't want to cut it off.
Right.
There's no wrong. It's just like, look, audition, think, and then you decide, and it's going to be cool. All this weird stuff comes out cool. So it's just a matter of what cool you're into. That looks good. So on this side, do you want to add? Do you want to chop off?
Let's see.
Yeah, it's good to get a ruler and see, because when I eyeballed it, I thought you'd be into the purple, and you actually got some of this green.
Yeah, I like the green.
Yeah. And over here, I really thought that that line was going to line up here. So until you have the ruler, you kind of, it's hard to eyeball what you're going to get or not get.
I don't know, I may want to wipe that off with some of the gray.
You could go, if you lined up, these little points are kind of the short straws. If you didn't want to add any fabric, you could make a straight line kind of like that.
Okay.
If you wanted. Oh, and then the whole thing is almost like a parallelogram.
Yeah. Let's do it.
And you'd have less gray.
No.
So no choice is bad.
Yeah, I like that though. I think I want to do that.
Okay. So I have a seam in this table, and when you cut over it, the threads don't cut because there's no table underneath. So you always have to go back and recut right when you go over the bump between. I just moved between the tables. Ah, restored.
Yes.
I came over more than I had to. So that right here is where my crack in the table is. So I just move it. It's not her blade. Her blade is good. The table's for a crack. So there is one block. And this is going to be hard to sew to, so I imagine you would want to probably clean that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or you could do something else. You could do this and create a new flat, but
Yeah, you know what I would do.
but like if I want to make this.
Long way since sewing with JC.
All right, so there you go. Then that's a little easier edge to sew to. You don't have that little niblet sticking out. So that's awesome.
That looks great. That's pretty.
And then you could go again, you can start adding, and maybe you do another set of blocks. Idea. You've got colorful background or neutral, colorful. So you could do another unit that's like colorful, white, colorful, and add that here and start to create a weird stripe moving through it. Like bold. Yeah, like really this is bold, but with all the chaos going on, what looks bold to your eye is this because it's different.
Right.
So this will stand out like a very striking feature of the quilt if you put a wide, interesting swath of white coming through.
Nice.
So that's an idea. What else could we do with this unit?
Could you attach yours too?
I could.
Yeah, and do the.
I'm going to add more to mine. I threw it on the, not out of the way of the camera. I'm going to add more to mine because I love this curve so much.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose it the way I'd have to cut this down. So I'm going to add here, and I'm going to keep it to make it longer.
So what you were saying is, like, if we wanted to do it, we could just keep it going kind of like that and just kind of.
Right.
Okay.
And it would be that, you could do that same method. I have a weird edge here, so I could
Oh, there you go.
lay these together, find whatever common angle. I mean, if I wanted the angle to go that way, I could change it to go that way.
I almost would want it off, like, kind of off.
Right, so
Yeah.
it looks like it's meant to be off.
Yeah.
And so you could take a crack here
Yeah.
and seam that, and then have this shape kind of.
Oh, that's pretty. That's pretty cool. I'm excited to see this come together.
And the other thing that's neat is we've got the string pieces have changed sides, and the curves have changed sides, so it's sort of like you're skiing a slalom or
Yeah.
something. So let me add fabric to this, and then maybe we'll join these together and end up with a big bold swath. And then when we go back to your design wall, we can add this in.
Okay.
So you can use regular fabric along with your scrappier, more wonky bits, or you could go wonky to wonky. But if you really want to see this, because this curve is more work, and that's a lot of work to do if you're not going to see it. So if you did a crumb block and a crumb block, it's going to camouflage this seam, and you're not going to see the shape that you made as well. You might want to do that, but if you want to see it, you want to have some contrast, and it can be two-pieced blocks that look very different, but this is a good contrast. I can really see that I have a cool curved shape here with this. So I would do something, by the time I'm going to do this much work to put a curved seam, I'm going to do it in such a way that your eyeball can see it, and someone goes, ooh, a curved seam.
Yeah. I did that.
You want credit for that. Yes. Okay, so let me add some pieces.
Yeah, that is pretty, that curve. Don't blame me, I wouldn't want to cut it off either.
You did it. So all I did here was pick the straight seam back a little bit to get this out of the way. And then this is what I had before. This is the new block that's going there. So I am going to lose some of this block and some of this block. So if I seam these like this is not what I want where these edges are. So I'm going to put my star where I want him. Remember, I'm going to lose, from wherever I cut, I'm going to lose 1/4 inch on both sides. So let's do that. And one thing I'm looking at is this low point here. If I cut at an angle, I have to touch that low point or I'm going to have a hole. So I could go, I can kind of pivot around, making sure I've got that low point in, and decide if I want to lose more of this block or more of this block. I mean, I could add here, but with this low point where it is, I can either cut this angle and lose a little bit over here to save my star, or I could cut more this angle, which would keep more of this block, but lose more of that. So let's say I'm going to use this for my final piece. So this position is pretty good. I've got my fabric is double layer, both sides face up. And then I'm gonna decide, I want this seam to go maybe at the same point. Slide this apart a little. I don't want this too long. The other thing I want to look at is when I do put this back on, when I cut this angle, I don't want to lose my star. So actually, I want to come in some because I want my star to be inside and not lose legs. Let's move that over to get my legs inside the frame, because when I cut here, see, I'm losing point there still. I think I think 1 point is okay to lose. Oh, I see what you're saying. I have more room over here. Okay, let's flip him all the way over. See, this is the kind of stuff you're doing. If I do this, how will it look? Do I want it like that? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, so if I do this cut, I've got, maybe move him down a little to keep that point. All right, and then if I do this, I'm going to be real close on that point, but I think I'll keep it. It'll have enough room that that point doesn't get chopped off. Whoops. Then I move everything and ruin what I just did. And if I cut here, I'm more than 1/4 inch, so I'll keep my point there. So that's a good spot for that. So I want to keep this point. I really don't care if I lose some of this block. He was not that interesting. So let's go. That looks good. Keeps my point. I got 1/4 inch by my point, so I don't want to cut him off. And because I'm not starting and stopping at a edge of a fabric here, when I get the blue marker over there, I'm going to do an alignment mark, because this doesn't really start or stop at a nice clean point. Oops. And it's a straight seam, so the angle doesn't matter as much, as long as you have a little dash across there that tells you where to start and end your seam. And then this is how much of this block ended up getting cut away. This can go back in the crumb bin or whatever you want to do with that. So I have my little alignment dashes that tell me where to line up. Is that valid? Yeah, that's valid. Nope. There, that one was at the bottom. That's why I can't find them. There we go. So we'll just fold these right sides together, do my 1/4 inch seam, and then this one will be coming off at the angle that I want.
Okay.
If you don't want them lined up like regular blocks and you want one at an angle, you can use that stack and whack to create a fun angle and get some bridge.
Okay.
Okay, so let's just sew that. So now we have this big giant unit that I can't get all in one frame. So we extended this middle section, which was the original section, with this crumb block and with this Wonky Improv star. So let's do some trimming. I'm gonna trim these edges first. This side is pretty easy. I've got fabric up to here. That's already forming pretty much a straight line, and then I have some sticking out over here. So let's just clean that up. So the next thing I put here will be easy to sew to. If you're gonna do a curve, don't bother cleaning it up, because you might need that little extra bit of overlap to get what you want. So if you know you're gonna put a straight seam there, clean it up. If you may or may not, and you might end up throwing a curve in there, I would leave this extra fabric, because it may come in handy to give you some interest. And if you're gonna cut an angle, sometimes this little extra 1/4 inch of fabric lets you get a little angle. If you're short on the top, sometimes just pivoting the ruler and having a little extra space. So you don't want to trim too early. Sometimes that's just the little bit you needed. Sometimes it takes a weird shape to fill in a weird shape. Okay, so on this side, this, let me turn it around to keep it in frame. This side of the white is raggedy. There was whatever was cut out there, fussy cutting or something. I guess not fussy cutting, probably applique. For whatever reason, that's weird shaped. So I have, this is my short point. And I can tilt it and keep more of this crumb block, or I can tilt it this way and keep more of this string pieced block. See if I can get that in the frame a little. And keep more of this. See, here's my short spot. I gotta keep that. I can go straight off and lose a decent chunk of both, or if I wanted to keep more of the string, or I can, this is kind of like a teeter-totter on this short point. I gotta have fabric there, so I don't have a hole. And what do we think? This way? That gives me a weird amount of fabric there. Yeah, I think we'll go this way. I do have the seam from my table, so that's not gonna cut. I gotta recut where the crack of my table is. And then my ruler wasn't quite long enough. As these pieces get bigger, a long ruler is nice. This is a 24-inch ruler, and I have a 22-inch square ruler, which is really nice when you start working with bigger, chunkier units. All right, so this is not wasted. I probably won't keep this little dingle-dangle, but this can go back in the crumb bin and be used for something else. Okay, then we have the top. So if you're mixing this with other blocks that are already square, you can always trim this. Put this center stripe at whatever angle you want, and you can trim out a square or rectangle from this. If you're going to be pairing it with other stuff that's wonky, then you don't have to trim this into a, you don't have to be any right angles. So here's my short point. So when I trim this to have fabric coverage, I can go kind of straight across-ish. I can keep more star as long as I have fabric to cover, or I can tilt this way. See, here I'm going to be cutting into my star, but this would give me more of this fabric. So you can teeter-totter on your little short point there. So let's teeter this way. This is a big chunk of fabric. So to break that up, I'm a 1/4 inch away here, so I'm keeping my point on my star. And I can do that. I'm gonna make a nice straight cut here. And I'm gonna, my ruler's almost long enough, not quite. Let's see. And right on the crack of the table, I'm sure it didn't cut. Sometimes in these seams he doesn't want to cut. We're going off piste, living dangerously. Living dangerously, cleaning up those threads. Okay, so this is our block. Now where's your block? I say your block. This is all gonna go in the same quilt anyways, probably. Okay, so let's see. We kind of talked about how cool it would be because there's string piecing here, and then the curved side is alternating. But your piece is way longer than mine, so we'd either be losing all the string here, or we can turn it like this and make another triangular unit in between. Let's see if I can get it in frame better. Let me move this back. There, that's better. I can get more in the frame. So if I put these like this, this is much longer, and I'm gonna have to lose a lot of your fabric on this block. But I can fit more fabric across like a diagonal, and we can make a wedge shape of unit that fits in here, and then not have to lose as much of your block. So we would need like a little wedge situation. And this can help us figure out what shape we need to make. What do you think? With this, that would work. You gotta audition things and see what you think. That's kind of neat. Kind of neat. But we either would have to fill in, see this angle's down, so if I trimmed even with this short point, I'd be losing a good chunk of this. You know what I mean? Or, well, I don't want to lose the star. We could put a skinny bit here.
Yeah. I think I like it better the way you had it, so it's a curve on this side
And on that side. Right, the curve crosses the stream. Yeah, I thought that was neat looking. So then I think we know, so this is where wonky and intentional come together. So we did all this wonky stuff and now we've come onto something that we're like, oh, that is cool. So if I make this, you gotta kind of eyeball the angle, maybe get your long ruler out. A yardstick might even be helpful to see how those angles come together. And then now I have this space. So we kind of have a theme, bright and bright, with the white fringe in between. I know I need to make this flat, so I need to make a triangle shape that fills up this space. So I can make a block roughly the size, and then I can use my stack and whack to make the seams match and lay where I want them, and then sew them together. So now we kind of have a direction. If we like this motif and we're going with it, we've got a plan on how to fill this up. And it starts to, sometimes you start doing stuff and then you see the plan forming. Sometimes, like in this case, I kind of have a plan and I'm going to fill to fit this plan. But we didn't have a plan until we just started doing stuff and it arose. It arose.
Yeah.
All of a sudden we're like, oh, this is kind of coming together as a thing. It's making something.
Yeah.
So since we put a star here, we can try to put a star in the bottom wedge. I have another star. So, is that gonna work? Maybe, maybe, maybe. I like this fabric though. This is tulip pink, isn't it? Maybe I don't want to cut that tulip pink off. But we have a small wedge, so maybe something like this. Put some grunge in there, and then some kind of star on the bottom. Let's do one of these. We can do that one or this one. What do you think? Maybe the darker one, because this is not going to give us very much contrast. So maybe we can put this darker one in here. Maybe that. Maybe not. Whatever. And then we can use just any old crumb block to fill in the background and fill that out. We did. We can also, like this is a big block that we can use to fill in the space around this and flesh it out, or that. So maybe fill in something here, we'll put some grunge here, and fill in something there and make a little turn.
Yeah, just let me take a picture so I can know what we're doing. I'm gonna actually,
Yeah.
because you don't want to use that. You want to use something else, right?
I don't know, it's possible. I mean, it's not an option. Okay. Yeah, always stop and take pictures because you'll never figure out what you had done before. So kind of tilting this so that this edge here is roughly straightish. I mean, you can trim it within reason, but I don't want to lose this point and I don't want to cut off all this pretty action here. And that tells you how big this wedge will need to be. And then just make some fabric and cut it to the size. Make fabric that'll cover it, cut it to shape. And then we can put this on your design wall with the other stripe that we have and kind of see where it fits in the bigger picture.
I like the snake.
Yeah. And you can snake on both sides. You can be straight on one side, both sides, and make it kind of like chevronish across the thing. But I like having a larger, more graphic design sort of pop out from the chaos.
Yeah, that's gonna be cute. I've always, in life, I've always winged it. I mean, but I do like patterns. I'm not gonna say I don't. I love patterns, but I like winging it too.
You're right. Yes, this is a good way to wing it. All right, well, that was method 3 of how we're starting to join together all of these joy sewing blocks. So it was normal, sew them together like any 2 quilt blocks, maybe trim the edges, then free piecing, and then this is kind of a take on free piecing. You're not just sewing 2 things together, trimming a new flat. You're overlapping them right sides up and cutting the seam you wish there was. So that's kind of our 3 steps. And really, other than auditioning and making design choices and kind of little tips like rocking the ruler on the low point and looking at, do I want to lose this fabric? Do I want to lose this fabric? Where can I find a straight line? And that's pretty much it.
Okay.
I think next time we might talk about using sashing and cornerstones with wonky blocks.
Okay.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah. That'd be fun.
So maybe we'll do that and start to bring the quilts together. And then I think it's just going to be looking at the 3 quilts. So we have a friend Christine doing this, and the tab's doing this, and I'm doing this. So we should have 3 totally different quilts start to come together.
Yeah.
And the videos will just be progress on what's taking shape, what's showing up on the side and wall.
Yeah.
Okay, if you do like your quilts a little bit more organized and a little less wonky, which you can take skills from this into a non-wonky quilt and apply this to non-wonky things. We have patterns with fabric, we have notions, and you can buy those on Tab's website. Give yourself a plug. Where do they find you?
Fiddlesticks Quilting at Etsy.com.
And then to get a hold of you, Facebook.
Yes, Facebook.
Also Fiddlesticks Quilting.
Yes.
All right, and they have we're my patterns on there.
Yes, your patterns on there.
And some beautiful fabrics. We're currently working on pulling threads patterns. If you are watching that series, we're pattern testing. That's about to be released, and it's beautiful for 4th of July using Paradise Park, which is that's a lot of P's.
Yeah.
It gets worse. Paradise Park, which is Pat Sloan's fabric line,
Yeah.
and the colorway is practically patriotic.
Yes.
So if you like P's,
Yeah.
and it's pulling threads. There's another one.
Yeah, I know, right?
There's a lot of P's. But that quilt comes in 3 colorways, and it works with your 2.5-inch pre-cut strips. It works with 10-inch pre-cut squares. It works with yardage. So whatever you got, you can make a beautiful quilt with that.
Yes.
And then when you have leftovers and you want to do something wild, then you tune into Joy Sewing
Yes.
and make a Joy Sewing quilt.
Yes.
That's your Wonky Improv sampler. So, okay, have a good day.